But it didn't end there. You see, in the 2000 Olympics, well, I should say, in the 1996 one, we had something else that was going on. At the opening of the games, this might be a little hard to see because it's black and white, but these gold creatures were being summoned up to bless the Olympic Games. Those gold creatures are actually the spirits of the Olympic Games, and they are referred to as Nikes. Now, when we get back to what else was going on, it gets very, very interesting. Now, going and taking a look at the official logo of the 1996 game, you will notice that there are 3 stars here and a crescent moon. If you recall, in the first DVD of this series, which was called The Arrival of the Antichrist, the most ancient symbol for Semiramis was a crescent moon, and the most ancient symbol for her son was Nimrod. Here we have the star and the crescent moon of Nimrod and Semiramis. And what's even more interesting is a master witch, or a third-level witch, will have 3 stars and a crescent moon as their insignia, because it denotes their rank in the occult world. In the 2000 Olympic Games, we have now Semiramis holding the laurel wreath. And it is Semiramis, the goddess herself. And what's even more interesting is that since the Olympic Games are Greek in origins, I ask you this: why are there 4 Roman horsemen and horses here? These are actually the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as far as are determined. These have absolutely nothing to do with this Greek goddess. However, they were purposely placed there anyways. But it gets even more interesting, because at the opening of the 2004 Olympic Games, we have these ladies dressed in virginal white, and this is what was reported now, opening up with a pagan ceremony to welcome in the spirit, I should say, of the Olympic Games, which we've already identified to as Nikes. But here we now have the ancient pagan ceremonies being performed. And here is, of course, one of the coins that was printed for this for the Olympic Games. And here we have that spirit, again, one of the Nikes. Now, when we get to the 2008 games, the Beijing Games, it gets very, very interesting. Things have changed drastically, because take a good look at this Olympic torch. Rather bizarre, if you ask me. It doesn't even really remind me much of a torch, hardly, because of the top. You know, something seems to be missing. But when you look at the spires, right here, the way they spiral, those are all 6s. Take a good look at those, ladies and gentlemen. If we were just to turn it, and I'm going to turn it like this, upside down, to make it easier for you. Notice they are all become 6s. Literally speaking, the torch of the Olympic game, the 2008 Beijing game, was completely covered in 6s. And you can see it very clearly here also. And one of those Olympiads who carried the torch can be seen carrying, right here, the torch, all those 6s. And what's even more interesting, when we take a look at the Olympic cauldron, that time around, you will note ringed all around it are those same sixes. Those are nothing but sixes that completely go around the Olympic cauldron. Now, these represent the various logos, different colored logos, for the 2012 Olympic Games that's going to be held in London. Now, I have to tell you, for all the logos I've ever seen in the Olympic Games, these are certainly among the most bizarre. I mean, I can barely make out that they are supposed to be 2012. Now, when we look at the larger version of one of them, you know, it's supposed to be 2012, and whatever this centerpiece is supposed to be here. Who knows what that's supposed to be? Unless we take another look at this. Remember, this is supposed to be the 2012 logo for the Olympic Games in London. When we take a look and break this down, it becomes a Z, an I, and there's that centerpiece, an O, and an N. It actually spells out the word Zion. Now, I'm not talking about those people who are into moving, into giving Jerusalem its own permanent homeland, free from terror and everything, that type of Zionism. No. We're talking about those people, the Illuminati, who have been trying to create a Zionist conspiracy. And by that, they are not Jewish by practice. True Jewish people wouldn't be involved in any of this. The Illuminati, their center of power in Europe, one of their major places is in London. And it's in a square mile of England known as the City. I know, I'm from, England. Well, anyways, it is the bankers, the ones who's actually pulled off this whole event to get the Olympic Games brought to London in the year 2012. But it is also the bankers who's trying to take control of everything through the central banks that they've established, through their religion and through their politics. And their politics involve the belief of Zionism. That's why it's been designed like this. Now, as much as they have perverted the calendar and the original intention and the pattern of it, a lot more has happened. We are now going to take a look into their Sabbaths, which they've disguised and we've embraced as Christian holidays. We're going to take a look at each and every single one carefully, and then, quite honestly, you're going to be responsible to God for all the information and the knowledge that you've just learned. I only hope that you do the right thing by it. We are now going to examine the wonderful holiday known as Christmas. Now, what could be possibly wrong with having the spirit of goodwill towards men and all this? Well, if you understand the truth behind the Christmas story, you're going to find out that the whole thing is wrong. When I was a child, I remember when my father used to take us out to the woods, and we would take an axe, we would find a nice full pine tree, and we would cut it down, we would drag it through the snow, we would bring it in the house, much to my mother's protest, because there'd be pine needles and snow everywhere. And then we would set it up on one of those metal stands so that it wouldn't move. We made sure it was really good and solid. And we would deck it with gold and silver trimmings and everything. And, of course, put the traditional five-pointed star on top of it. And this is what most people, if they're from my generation, and most people nowadays, We've gone through that. I'm not saying that you will go out and cut down a tree. No, a lot of people like going for the artificial stuff. So what could possibly be wrong with the Christmas tree? Is there anything unbiblical or ungodly about it? Well, according to the Bible, in Jeremiah chapter 10, we pick it up in verse 1. It says, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord." And folks, I want you to memorize these next 7 words. "Learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain." Now listen very carefully to this. We're in the middle of verse 3. "For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." Ladies and gentlemen, that's a Christmas tree. And right here in God's own word, he says, "Learn not the way of the heathen." The heathen are the ancient occultists. They're also known as pagans. You are not supposed to be practicing any of this. God's own word makes it very clear not to be involved in this. And yet, there are going to be those people who's going to try to convince you, well, God's not talking about a tree here. He was referring to a plant or to something else. I've heard these arguments over and over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, and quite honestly, at this age, I'm sick of it. Because God's word makes it very clear. These people have gone out, they've cut down a tree, they brought it home, they fastened it so it didn't move, they put all types of gold and silver decorations on it. They decked the halls with it. And this is exactly what we're doing to this very day. So don't tell me that this is something other than a tree. Because this is exactly what those pagans were doing then, and that's exactly what we're doing now. And when we take a look just at one of these pictures, this is exactly what the Bible had been talking about. People had been trimming it and decking it with gold and silver and all these wonderful, beautiful items that are on it. The pagans, among other things, they would put little pieces of cake, candy, and sweet items on it. This is why to this very day we're putting candy canes and other things like that on it, because it's part of the ancient pagan practice of honoring the winter stag god. Now, as I just stated, Jeremiah makes it very, very clear that Christmas trees are not supposed to be observed. They have absolutely nothing to do with anything that is good or godly. So then the question is, why are we doing it? On top of the Christmas tree, and just about most Christmas trees, you will find that there is a 5-pointed star. Now the question is, why do we have, such an item on top of our trees? If you recall, well, there's many different candies, little cakes and offerings and such here. All this is here because it goes all the way back to Nimrod. Nimrod himself, as depicted here, this is one of the ancient depictions on a relief of Nimrod. Nimrod himself, if you remember, was the stag god. He was considered the winter god. And just like at Rockefeller Center, where they have these huge Christmas trees every year, all lit up, at the top you'll find the traditional 5-pointed star. Now, interesting enough, at the base, in front of Rockefeller Center, whose address is 666, mind you, and it's no accident, because if you've ever gone to that building, and I've seen it and been there before, the very top, these huge neon lights, there are 3 red 6s that will glow at night. But at the base of this tree is a statue, and that remains there all year. And let me show you a larger version of this. That statue is